He kept saying everything was fine, but his black face said otherwise. It started with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He kept saying everything was fine, repeating those same words whenever anyone asked. But his face, his tired eyes, and the weight he carried in his silence told a very different story. At first, no one questioned him. After all, he was known for being strong, the kind of person who always put others first and never showed weakness. But sometimes, the truth finds a way to show itself, even when someone tries so hard to hide it. This is not just another story. It's a true story about someone who wore a mask of strength for the world, while inside, he was breaking piece by piece. He laughed at jokes, joined conversations, and acted like nothing was wrong. But when the noise faded and the lights went out, the cracks in his heart could no longer stay hidden. His friends noticed, his family noticed, and maybe deep down he wanted them to see what he could not say out loud. What makes this story powerful is that it reflects something we all go through at some point. Those moments when we insist we're fine because we don't want to be a burden, even though our face whispers the truth we are too afraid to share. It's about silence, about emotions too heavy to carry, and about the unseen battles that so many fight behind a quiet smile. As the days went by, the gap between his words and his truth only grew bigger. He kept saying he was okay, but every glance at him revealed a struggle he could no longer hide. And then one night, something happened that changed everything. That night, when everything seemed quiet, his world felt louder than ever. The room was dim, the clock ticking on the wall, and the silence pressing down like a heavy weight. He sat by the window, looking out into the dark streets, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. To anyone else, it would look like an ordinary evening, but inside him, a storm was raging. The same storm he had been hiding for weeks, maybe even months. He had mastered the art of smiling at the right time, of saying the right words, of convincing people that life was perfectly normal. But in that moment, alone with his thoughts, his face showed the story his words had been trying to bury. He wasn't always like this. Friends remembered him as the life of the group, the one who could lift others up with just a few words. At family gatherings, he was the person everyone turned to, knowing he would always say, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." And maybe that's where it all began, this endless pressure to be the strong one. The one who carried everyone else's worries but never admitted his own. Slowly, he built walls around himself, pretending that his struggles weren't real. Yet those closest to him started noticing the changes. His laugh wasn't as bright anymore, his eyes seemed distant, and sometimes he drifted away in the middle of conversations, lost in thoughts he never shared. People asked him what was wrong, and every time his reply was the same. "Ai fine." Simple, short, and final. But the truth lived in the pauses between his words. It lived in the late nights when he couldn't sleep, in the way he avoided eye contact, and in the quiet sighs he thought no one heard. The story became clearer when small pieces of his life started to surface. A missed call here, a message left unanswered, a sudden absence from places he once loved to be. There was something he wasn't telling anyone, something he couldn't bring himself to say out loud. Those who cared about him could feel it. They could see the struggle in his face even when he tried to cover it with another smile. And as the days passed, the distance grew. He was there, but not fully. His body moved through routines, but his heart seemed somewhere far away. What was he hiding? Why was he so afraid to speak? The answers remained locked inside him, but one thing was certain. Something was about to happen that would reveal the truth he had been carrying all along. The conflict began to grow quietly, almost invisibly, like a shadow that stretched a little further each day. On the surface, his life seemed ordinary. He went to work, met people, and followed the same routines. But behind those routines was a hidden battle no one could see. His friends thought maybe he was just tired, or maybe he needed a break. His family believed he was simply busy with responsibilities. No one imagined that every morning he was fighting with himself just to get out of bed, just to put on the mask that said, "I'm fine." What made it more complicated was the way he avoided opening up. He would change the subject, make a joke, or turn the conversation back to the other person. To him, admitting the truth felt like weakness, and he couldn't bear the idea of letting anyone down. Yet his silence was slowly becoming heavier than words. Each day, his expressions betrayed him, and those who noticed began to feel their own worry grow. There were small moments that revealed the cracks. A close friend recalled sitting with him at a cafe, where he smiled politely but kept staring out the window, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Another time, during a family dinner, he laughed at a story but immediately fell into silence when no one was looking, his eyes drifting to some place far away. These details, small as they seemed, began to paint a picture of someone carrying far more than he admitted. One subplot unfolded through the people around him. His best friend started questioning whether she should push him to talk or give him space. His mother noticed the late nights and the fading energy, but wondered if confronting him would only make him retreat further. The people closest to him were caught between wanting to help and fearing they might lose him if they pushed too hard. At the same time, there was something else he was hiding, something tied to his past. Old memories seemed to haunt him. Memories he never spoke about but which showed in the way he sometimes froze when certain topics came up. It was as if he was carrying a story too painful to share, a story that had built the walls around him in the first place. The tension only grew thicker. Everyone could see the distance, the silence, the face that said more than his words ever did. But what no one knew was how close he was to reaching the point where silence would no longer be enough to hold it all inside. The days kept passing, but something was shifting in a way that everyone could feel. His words were still the same, that same old line, "I'm fine," but now even strangers could sense the weight behind them. He walked slower, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if he was carrying something no one else could see. His phone buzzed with messages from friends checking in, but more often than not, he left them unread. The silence around him was no longer just quiet. It was loud, almost deafening, filling every space he entered. Those closest to him began whispering to one another, worried but unsure what to do. His best friend noticed he had stopped showing up to their regular meetups. His mother grew more restless, staying awake late into the night waiting to hear him move in his room. Even at work, colleagues exchanged looks when he seemed distracted, lost in thoughts that pulled him further away from the present. The more people noticed, the more the tension built, because everyone felt something was coming, they just didn't know what. He too could feel it, the breaking point approaching. There were moments when he wanted to open his mouth and let the truth spill out, but the words froze before they reached his lips. Fear kept him quiet. Fear of being judged, fear of being misunderstood, fear of what might happen if he admitted the truth. Instead, he pushed it all deeper inside, but the effort to hide was becoming harder with each passing day. One evening, he was sitting with his friend in the same cafe where they had shared countless laughs before. The coffee sat untouched in front of him, steam fading into the air. His friend tried to start a casual conversation, but he barely responded, his eyes fixed on the table, his jaw tight. Every pause in his words felt heavy, like there was something just beneath the surface, waiting to escape. His friend wanted to ask again, to push harder, but the fear of breaking him held her back. That unspoken tension filled the room, making even the simplest silence unbearable. At home, the atmosphere was no lighter. His family noticed the late nights turning into early mornings, his footsteps pacing the floor when everyone else was asleep. They heard the quiet sighs through the walls, the restless shifting in his bed. It was as if he was wrestling with something in the dark, something invisible but powerful enough to keep him awake night after night. The conflict reached deeper when he stumbled upon an old memory he had locked away. A picture tucked inside a book, a reminder of a time he thought he had moved past, but which still haunted him. He stared at it for a long time, his hands trembling slightly as he slipped it back into place. That night, his eyes carried a new weight, darker and more unsettled than before. Everyone around him was waiting, holding their breath, sensing that the truth was on the verge of spilling out. The distance, the silence, the half-smiles, none of it could hold much longer. And as another night fell, the feeling grew stronger that something was about to happen, something that would change the course of his story forever. That night, when everyone felt the silence pressing heavier than usual, something unexpected happened. His best friend, who had been debating for days whether to confront him or not, finally decided to stop waiting. She showed up at his door unannounced. He looked surprised when he opened it, his eyes weary, his expression caught between relief and discomfort. For a moment, he tried to put on the familiar smile, but this time it didn't come naturally. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, sensing that if she gave him the chance, he might close the door and shut her out again. The air inside his room was thick, filled with the smell of coffee cups left untouched and papers scattered across the desk. It wasn't chaos, but it wasn't peace either. It looked like a place where someone had been living in their head more than in the real world. She sat down quietly, waiting for him to speak. But instead of opening up, he grew restless, pacing back and forth. Then, for the first time, she saw something different. An envelope lying on the desk, sealed but with his name written on the front in someone else's handwriting. Curiosity filled her, but she didn't touch it. Still, the moment she noticed it, he froze. His face changed, his usual calm mask slipping away completely. He quickly tucked the envelope into a drawer, as if it carried the very truth he had been running from. Her questions started rising, but he dismissed them, saying it was nothing, just old stuff. Yet his hands trembled, and his voice was too thin to be convincing. The discovery of that envelope shifted everything. The conflict was no longer just about what he was hiding inside himself. Now it seemed there was something external, a piece of his past or maybe a connection to someone else, that was adding weight to his silence. His friend couldn't shake off the image of his reaction, the way fear had flashed across his face, sharper than anything she had seen before. The next day, things grew more intense. His family noticed he left the house early and came back late, avoiding meals and conversations. His phone rang more often, and sometimes he would step outside to answer, lowering his voice so no one could hear. The distance that had already been there now stretched further, as if he was carrying a secret that didn't just belong to him but involved someone else too. Rumors began to stir among friends who couldn't help but notice his sudden absences. Some thought he was hiding a personal failure, others whispered that he might be dealing with something from long ago. The mystery deepened, and those who cared about him were left even more confused, torn between frustration and worry. Inside, he was fighting two battles now, the one within his heart and the one connected to whatever was inside that envelope. The weight of both was crushing him, and his attempts to appear fine grew weaker by the day. The suspense around him thickened, and the people who loved him could only wait, knowing that whatever he was hiding was going to surface soon, and when it did, it would change everything. That night, when the weight of silence became unbearable, he finally reached for the envelope. His hands shook as he held it, and for a moment he almost put it back, afraid of what it would unleash. But then, with his best friend sitting quietly across from him, waiting and watching, he tore it open. The paper inside carried words he had tried to run from, words that explained the very reason behind his long silence. It was a letter from someone from his past, someone he thought had disappeared from his life forever. The letter spoke of regrets, of mistakes that had never been mended, and of secrets that had been buried too long. As he read, his voice cracked, revealing the pain he had carried for years. His friend listened without interruption, her eyes soft with understanding. For the first time, he admitted what he had been hiding, that he had been blaming himself for something that wasn't even his fault. The burden of guilt had grown so heavy that it had consumed his joy, stolen his peace, and left him trapped in silence. Saying it out loud felt like breaking chains that had held him for far too long. His family soon gathered as well, drawn by the sound of his trembling words. They stood in the doorway, finally hearing the truth that explained all the distant stares and late nights. Instead of anger, there was relief. Instead of judgment, there was love. In that moment, he realized he had never been as alone as he thought. The room, once filled with silence, now carried the weight of truth, and with it, a sense of release. But just as it seemed the storm was clearing, the twist came. At the bottom of the envelope was a second page he hadn't noticed before. He unfolded it with careful hands, only to find a new revelation. This wasn't the end of the past coming back. It was the beginning of something larger. The letter hinted at another secret, one connected not just to him but to someone he cared about deeply. His face went pale as he read the final line, and everyone watching knew the story was far from over. He sat there holding the second page, his eyes moving over the words again and again, as if reading them twice would make them easier to carry. His best friend leaned closer, waiting for him to speak, and finally, he did. The letter revealed not just the guilt he had been living with, but also a reminder that the story was never only his. Someone else had been carrying a piece of the past too, someone who had written this as a way of reaching out, not to accuse him, but to set things right. The weight that had felt like a prison was suddenly lighter, because he realized the silence had only made it worse. With trembling honesty, he explained everything, to his family, to his friend, and for the first time, to himself. The unanswered calls, the sleepless nights, the way his face betrayed the words he spoke. It all made sense now. His friend took his hand and reminded him that healing doesn't come from hiding but from sharing. His family, who had worried endlessly, now found relief in finally understanding the truth. They offered him comfort instead of questions, love instead of judgment. The days that followed weren't magically easy, but they were different. He started answering his phone, slowly reconnecting with those he had pushed away. He began talking openly about the memories that once haunted him, and in doing so, he found others who admitted they had been carrying silent struggles of their own. What once felt like shame transformed into strength, and the mask he had worn for so long began to fall away. The story closed not with dramatic change, but with a quiet, powerful truth. No one is truly fine all the time, and that's okay. Words may cover up pain for a while, but faces, hearts, and actions will always tell the deeper story. By choosing to speak, he discovered that what he thought would push people away actually brought them closer. Looking back, he realized the letter wasn't just a reminder of the past, it was an invitation to move forward. His journey left behind a message for anyone watching: never underestimate the battles hidden behind a smile, and never be afraid to listen when someone's face tells you a truth their words cannot. And in that final reflection, the story found its ending, not in silence, but in honesty, healing, and hope.